Okay, so in this lesson we're going to talk about some more rhetorical devices, and just to kind of review, it's really important to know the proper terminology whenever you're trying to do some kind of rhetorical discourse, because it's going to kind of give you a one-up in your analysis. So for example, if you knew that something being used was called repetition, that would be pretty good, and that would get you an okay grade on something. But if you could be more specific and say that it's anaphora, then that would just kind of give you a leg up in saying that you really know what you're talking about, and it would give you some credibility as a writer. Establishing ethos. So the first one we'll talk about is litides, and this is an understatement. So basically it's going to be denying the opposite or contrary of an otherwise used word, or it intensifies an intended sentiment. So for example, we're talking about an understatement. Remember, it's the opposite obviously of an overstatement. So it's saying hitting that telephone pole certainly didn't do your car any good, and that is definitely an understatement. It's intensifying the intended sentiment, which is your car looks awful, but it's really understating that to intensify that further. The second one is parallelism, which is a little bit of a broader term, but it's good to know what it is to kind of start off with. And it's recurrent synectical similarity, and this is used to show equal importance in ideas, and it adds balance, rhythm, and clarity to an idea. So for example, he ran up to the bookshelves, grabbed a chair, stepped on his tiptoes, and pulled the 50-pound book off the shelf. So here we see a real synectical similarity in all of the verbs being lined up together, having the exact same synectical form. And this kind of organizes things and puts them in a list just to show the balance that each one needs. This next one is pronounced different ways. Some say parenthesis, some say parenthesis. I like to say parenthesis just because it kind of reminds me of parentheses that we use in sentences, because it's kind of the same sentiment or the same idea. It's a word, phrase, or whole sentence inserted as an aside in the middle of another sentence. And this is kind of momentarily shifts the attention of the reader, which has a really pronounced effect, kind of emphatic effect. So for an example, by saying, but the new calculations, and here we see the value of relying upon up-to-date information, showed that man-powered flight was possible with design. So it just kind of adds an inner idea that needs to be emphasized in order to get the whole idea of the entire idea. And the last one we're going to talk about is going to be apostrophe. And this interrupts the discussion or discourse and directly addresses a person or personified thing, and that does not have to be directly present in the idea. And it gives a vent to display emotion which can no longer be held back. And this one is not always going to be seen in written discourse or written rhetorical situations, because those tend to stay with logical appeals, but you do see it sometimes when there's an emotional effect or pathos being used. So for example, we would see, but all such reasons notwithstanding, dear reader, and so there's our aside kind of interrupting the discourse to directly address, so dear reader, does not the cost in lives persuade you by itself that we must do something immediately about the situation? So it's directly addressing this to just put emphasis on the emotional appeal that's trying to be used.